Hello. I'd like to comment on today one of the things in language learning that really gets to me. It really annoys me to such a huge extent. And that is when language schools advertise that you can become fluent in a language in just a couple of months. So let's break this down and really think about this. It is a lie, and it is not possible to do. But let's break down a couple of questions and really judge the logic of what they're saying. So think about these following questions. How long did it take you to acquire your first language? Whatever your first language may be, maybe it's Portuguese, Spanish, French. How long did it take you to acquire that language so you could use it comfortably? Here's the answer: your entire life. You've spent your entire life acquiring your first language. From the age of 5, you probably spoke very well. And at that point, you would have done 0 grammar exercises. You have barely even started school yet. So it just shows you that even from a young age as well, you're automatically acquiring language. But it's taken you 5 years to get to a point of conversational fluency. I mean, there's a couple of reasons for this. The first reason is when you're a child, you know nothing about the world. So before you can even learn a language, you've got to think, okay, what is this situation? What's happening here? And start to understand the context of the situation you're in. And as that context arises more and more and more, you will acquire the vocabulary that accompanies it. The second question is, how long is it going to take to be fluent in English? Well, as I said before, some language schools say you can become fluent in English in a couple of months. Well, we just defined that, if you want to be fluent in a language, it takes your entire life to do so. So I think it's probably a good idea to try and define fluency. Now, you could take fluency from a native language perspective, and you could think, okay, fluency is being able to say whatever I want, whenever I want, about any possible topic. That's the common consensus of fluency. I don't believe that. I don't believe that's a good definition of fluency. I think fluency, not just in your first language, but in any language that you study, especially English, which is my native language and the language that I teach. I think a better definition of fluency would be having the ability to express yourself in a way that someone understands. Think about a conversation that you've had in first your first language and then in your second language. So in your first language, maybe you're talking about a topic that you're a specialist in. Maybe you're a biochemist. Maybe you're speaking to somebody who's not a biochemist. So you'll start by using all this very sophisticated vocabulary, which that other person doesn't understand. So what do? You reduce the barrier of entry. You'll simplify what's happening. And then you'll re-explain it to that person so they can understand. And once they understand, they'll probably start asking questions. And that is when the conversation truly blossoms. In a second language, a lot of people have very technical vocabulary. But when they come across somebody who doesn't know that vocabulary, even a native who may not be a specialist in that area, does that person have the ability to explain that concept at a lower level to make it comprehensible for someone else? That is the true trick of fluency. It's been able to communicate at different levels of your idea. Maybe it's using the most sophisticated vocabulary on the highest level. And then on the lowest levels, the simplest possible way to express the idea. I think especially I've noted from my classes over the last 5 years is that a lot of students, when they don't have the specific word that they would say in their first language, they freeze. And one of the important things that I found to encourage is try to go around the idea. How can I go around this idea? I don't know this specific word, but I must have words that I already know that can help me elaborate and explain this idea so it's understood by the person I'm speaking to. Now, this is a process. This is not a short process. This is a long process. I want you to consider this example. Think about a holiday that you've been on and imagine that you're going to speak to 8 different friends over 8 different days since coming back from your holiday. On the first day, the conversation's going to be a bit of a disaster because maybe you're really excited and you're trying to say everything at once because your brain hasn't organized the best way to deliver this information. So maybe it'd be like, on the third day, I did this. On the second day, I went to the beach and it was beautiful because of all these things. And you probably won't get a good reaction from the person you're speaking to. And the reason why is because, well, the information wasn't clear and easy to understand. And it wasn't in a time order that made sense. So how can somebody get excited about something that you're not presenting in the right way? So imagine that slowly between days 1 to 3, you're figuring out this process. How do I say this so that I get the reaction I want out of somebody else? After all, that's what we have conversations. We're looking for a reaction from somebody. Probably the third or fourth time you've had this conversation, you figured out the time order. You figured out how to explain what happened on your holiday so that you get at least a minimal reaction from somebody. And you start to feel good again because now you've figured out that, okay, this person is validating me because I have something interesting to say. So what happens on the 5th and 6th time? Well, now you start to get bored of what you're saying. We all know the person who repeats the same story 50,000 times and you feel bored listening to it. Well, it's the job of the person telling that story to improve it. So how do we improve it? Well, we will change the vocabulary. We will make our sentences more concise and more direct. We could use different literary techniques, which we probably use naturally just from our experiences in the world, to engage their attention. So you've done this on days 5 and 6. So by the time you get to day 7 and 8, you have kind of figured out the best way to tell your story in the most concise possible way, so you get the best possible reaction ever. So maybe on the last day, the conversation about your holiday starts. You never guess what happens to me on holiday. Okay, really strong opening statement. It's exciting. Somebody's waiting for your response. And they'll be like, what happened? Well, when I arrived at the airport, I almost didn't get into the country because my passport was 5 months out of date. And then this started this whole process of having to be deported. Whatever the story is, getting somebody hooked on your story is the key to conversation in any format. So, is it possible on any level to speak fluently in a couple of months? I think there's one way. You're not going to be able to speak fluently about every single topic you talk about in your first language. That's just impossible. Maybe a couple of people in the world could do that, but for the majority of people, it's just not possible. However, you could focus your language education around things that are exciting, relevant, and interesting for people to listen to, and for yourself as well. So, for example, why would you learn vocabulary about biochemistry if you have never spoken about biochemistry in your life? Why would you learn vocabulary about a hotel if you have no plans to speak in, say, English in a hotel in the future? It has no sense to have multiple topics at once for you to try to speak about. Focus on one thing. That's something that's very relevant to you, that you really enjoy talking about, and you'd like to have those conversations in another language. So say, for example, say it's the World Cup right now. Say that I really, really, really love football. Okay, but I don't know a single word of that in another language. Okay, well, that's where you focus the 2 or 3 months on. Okay, let me engage in football. So you can go and watch videos or podcasts or audiobooks, whatever you can get about football, and start to try and understand what's being comprehended. Now, you don't have to understand things word for word for word. That's not important. Little by little, as you watch 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 videos and more, I guarantee you, in the same specific topic, the same vocabulary will repeat and repeat and repeat. And through that process, you will naturally acquire the language. Why? Because you understood the message. You don't have to understand things the first time. You don't have to understand things the 50th time. Eventually, you will understand it the more you expose yourself. So I do think it's possible to become fluent in a specific topic in a couple of months. That's entirely achievable as long as you immerse yourself in content that's enjoyable and also is relevant for you. It's something that you're going to use. But to speak the exact same things across all possible conversations that you would talk about in your first language, in your second language, is not possible in a couple of months. Please like and subscribe to this video, and I'll see you again soon.